moment that...
Other questions, thoughts, comments?
I have a couple. My name's Tanae Mosley. I'm a reporter with Thelevisalazer. And we have a couple of questions from some of our viewers.
Sure.
How will you shore up the road fund in Lawrence County?
The road fund, as you know, the monies for the state road dollars come from two places. They come from the national, the Federal Highway Trust Fund, where we get a portion of dollars back from the federal government. And that's about $750 million a year, plus or minus. Then we have the variable excise tax on gas. We all pay 9% of the wholesale price of gas. That's where the other money comes from. And that's a similar amount of money. But that's pegged out, unfortunately. Until we get back above $2.85 a gallon, we're not going to see one more cent. And in fact, if people drive less, we'll see less. Hopefully, if gas is cheaper, they'll drive a little more, and it'll go like this. But it's kind of, we know about what we're going to get. We're probably going to get about another $700 million from that every year. We have about $1.4 billion, plus or minus, that's going to flow through this state in the course of a year. A little over $1 billion, because some of it goes to things that aren't even specifically road-related, but they're peripherally road-related. You know, they might be mowing, they might be signage, they might be other things. But the roads themselves, $1 billion-ish. That's a lot of money on the one hand. But on the other hand, the amount of roads we have in the state, and this sounds crazy because everywhere you go, there's somebody who goes, well, we need a road here. We don't have a road there. We have more miles of road per person in this state than almost any state in America. I mean, it's unbelievable. Because one thing we've always done is we've laid down roads. And now the problem is some of them are in kind of tough situation. They're tough shape. Part of those roads have been laid down because of our topography. You kind of can't get there from here, kind of thing. And so we've laid roads down, and some of them are in tough shape. I was in Martin County when I was running for office. And this, you asked me about this county, but I'll just share this with you. I came around a bend just south of, maybe I was somewhere between Warfield and Inez. Came around a bend, maybe some of you have been there. There was a hole in the road that is 4 times bigger than this table. Just a big old hole. The road was just gone. And there were a couple of cones in those orange barrels, one of which had also fallen in. So you couldn't even see it. Now, and we came to a hole, like, oh my gracious, how is it that nobody drives in and say, oh, everyone knows it's there? Well, what the heck is that? I thought, that's crazy. And I remember saying, if I'm the governor, we're going to fix that hole before a school bus ends up in it with a new driver who forgot it was there. So I realized there's problems. And again, where I grew up, it was the same thing. I mean, it was just little country roads in the mountains, and they were always in tough shape. I say all this only to say there is no extra source of dollars. The dollars are going to come from having more people. Right now, all the source of road funds are those two sources. Conceivably, you could get money from the General Assembly. You could appropriate dollars from other places, conceivably, although we've not historically done that. But right now, there's not even the ability to do that. We have the worst funded pension system in America. We've got all these other issues on so many other fronts. And so the question is then, where do you get the money? The sad thing, too, there's always been a cash buffer that's been kept in place. There's always been sort of an emergency reserve if you have a real tough winter or what have you. Unfortunately, the administration that preceded mine spent every bit of it out. It's always been passed from one administration to the next because it's basically $40 million worth of projects in 1 month. They blew it all out the door to all their friends. So if you didn't get yours, you got hosed. But guess what? It went to all their little greasy wheel friends all over the place. And we were able to get some of these. I mean, it's just a lot of it has been wasted. I will tell you this. Part of it's how I was raised. I like to think of myself as frugal. My wife has other words for it, but I'm frugal. I will say this. I will be a good steward with these dollars. My heart is in communities like this, because these are the kind of communities I grew up in. I grew up in a town of 250 people. How many people live in Louisa?
3,000.
How many?
3,000.
3,000. We used to have to go, like the school, the post office, the churches, the gas stations, everything was in town. It was a town like this, about 2,500 people was the big town. Like when I was a little kid, and my older brother, my grandmother was just laid to rest this week, earlier this week. She was 102 years old. And as the family, we were back and we were talking about this. And I was talking to my older brother. We remembered we used to talk about how we'd get mad. We loaded up our wagon. We were going to run away from home. And we were going to go to the big town, Gorham, or a big town. And it was a town of about 2,500, so a little smaller than Louisa. That was the big city where we were going to go and make our fortune with our stuff in our wagon. So my heart is in communities like this. This is where I grew up, in places like this. And so how are we going to get more dollars in there? We're going to create more jobs and more opportunity and more revenue for this state so that we can afford to do more things. And then because those jobs and the people who have those jobs are going to live in communities that are going to demand resources, roads and sewers and infrastructure, and because they're paying taxes, we'll have the dollars to do that. Tennessee, they create more than 20,000 jobs a year, more than we do in Kentucky. 20,000 jobs a year, every year for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Think about that. Think about the last 5 years. Think about what another 100,000 jobs in Kentucky would look like. Another 100,000 people paying taxes. A pretty good number of those 100,000 buying houses and buying cars, buying four-wheelers, buying things in boats and, what was it, Yatesville? Where did I just come over here? Just up the road here. Think, all these things, you think about. If we had 100,000 people working, that money would ripple back into our communities. So I wish I told you there's a secret stash of cash that got held up. It got spent out. We're trying to shore it back up. If you notice, and I feel bad about it, if you notice, this summer, the sides of roads were not cut like they've been cut in some years. There wasn't any money. This state is broke. We're broke. We really are. But I will say this, I grew up learning how to take a buck and stretch it a long way, and we are going to do that in Kentucky. We will be good stewards of the money we have. And we're trying to prioritize. The first thing I did is I looked around the country, I said, what states have the best approach to infrastructure, to their roads and bridges and things of that sort? And I took our transportation cabinet leadership and I sent them to the state of North Carolina, actually. Because North Carolina has got as good a program as anybody. It's not based on politics. The one thing I will promise you is this, and this may be good news for you or bad news for you. I don't care whether it's a Republican county or Democrat county. I really don't. I really don't. To me, where's the need? Where are we as a taxpayers going to get the best bang for the buck? You look at the people I've appointed to my cabinet. They're Republicans and Democrats. I don't care. I'm a Republican. I've always been a Republican. I'll tell you truthfully, the conservative thinking, frankly, is coming from Republicans in Frankfurt. And I'm asking you not only to send Joe back to Frankfurt, but frankly, for any of the people in other districts, we need conservative thinkers. And frankly, they're coming out of one party right now in this state, sadly. It wasn't that way a generation ago, but it is now. If people come, and the right people with the right attitude, I will be a good steward of the monies that you send. We will get a good bang for the buck. And I sent these folks to North Carolina because they have a program where they just look at cost-benefit analysis of everything. We'll get the best return for the taxpayers' money by putting a road here and not there. It ends up with some surprise. People think, well, we've got all the political muscle, so we should get the asphalt. No, not necessarily. So it really is going to depend on where there's opportunity. I will tell you, though, I didn't even ask where it fit in the metrics. I didn't plug the hole down Warfield. I don't know if you. I was like, that's it. That's insane. That just bugged me.
And quite frankly, you and the transportation secretary were able to find us some money the other day to send up here to the fiscal court and above and beyond. And I know Judge Osborne, that was well received, wasn't it?
But I'll tell you this: it's because you deserve it. It wasn't because you greased any wheel. The reality is these things are going to be made for the decisions. It's where's the best use for those dollars. We've done the same actually with some of our airfields around the state too. Because another thing people look at, if they want to come into a place in Eastern Kentucky, we've got some decent little airfields, but some of them were getting kind of tired. So we put some money into those because a lot of people say, well, I hear about this Eastern Kentucky, I hear about this Eastern Kentucky work ethic and this and that. Most of them are not going to drive down into some of our communities, but if they can fly in here in a small plane, they'll do it. What's the first asphalt they see when they come in? It's some of these airfields. If we can show them that, listen, we can take care of this and we can create opportunity here. And I'll tell you, a perfect example of it is, how far is it up to Sandy, what's the main Sandy, the airport there? How far is it? It's a little ways, 40 miles from here. That's in the district of the aforementioned person I just mentioned. He's no friend of mine. He sues me all the time. He's the biggest obstacle and thorn in my side. And yet we're spending as much money on that airport as anywhere. Why? Because it's just frankly, all else being equal, a good place for the people of Kentucky to have a potential return on their money. And so up at that big Sandy airport, we're spending a couple $1 million. But it needs to be, and there's justification for it, and it's the kind of thing. And good things will come. Good things will come. You had another question to say?
Would you be in favor of legalizing medical marijuana in Kentucky?
Medical marijuana, yes, if it was legislatively passed and if it was prescribed, and controlled like every other controlled substance. I would sign such legislation. Any other form of marijuana, including recreation, not a chance. Not a chance. I think it's a bad mistake. So I will. It depends on how it's written. It depends on how it's regulated. I'm telling you what. We have way too many people who are disabled in Kentucky that are not disabled. And I'll be darned if I'm there and always sitting home, taking care of their disability by being medically doped up. So it depends on how it's written. I do think, however, that there is real medicinal value in cannabis. There is. Not only the cannabis oils, but also the product itself, THC. But there's so many iterations of it now, the synthetics, and people are making it potent to a degree that it has to be very carefully regulated. But I'm telling you, this year, a few months ago, I lost my 14-year-old nephew to cancer. And I'll tell you what, if you see people dying of cancer, people suffering with epilepsy, people suffering of things that I'm telling you for a fact, there is value in medicines that are currently illegal. And if handled properly, the people of Kentucky could benefit from the right legislation on that front. It really is going to depend on the legislation and the will of the people. I'm not going to try to force a round peg in a square hole. But if there's support in the House and the Senate, and if it's crafted right, I would sign such legislation. Thank you all. Let me just ask this of you. Make sure you vote. Make sure you talk to people that aren't here. You look around this table and you look around this restaurant. You know 5, 10, 50, 100 people that could have been here, might have been here, maybe at work or what have you. Get people to vote. Vote their values, not their party. The party doesn't matter in a general election. The values do. It's important. People who say, "Well, I don't like this candidate, I don't like that candidate, I don't like either candidate," that's crazy at the federal level or any other. I mean, if you know Jill, you know what she does in this community. You know what she brings. All right? So it's, they're preaching the choir.
Daddy always said she was the apple of his eye. From the moment that he saw her, that first sight. He made her his back in '67. She came from Detroit, or was it a heaven? His '67 Chevy Malibu, red leather.